Absolutely not.
Would you say you're a pacifist?
I'm a complete pacifist. Not a Buddhist, but a complete pacifist.
All right. So I'm going to feel pretty safe going through this.
You are. No, but I mean, I can see that. I mean, you are the one who, you can, first of all, you can outrun me. Do it. Go ahead.
That's what you want?
Yeah. Bigger, man.
There wasn't enough action?
Yeah, there wasn't.
All right.
Good job.
I'm about to unleash the sound here, too.
Yeah, it's okay, man. There's nothing that I say to you that can't be said to the world.
In front of the whole world. Okay, hi everyone. Thanks for joining us today. This is Brian Pagano. I'm the Chief Solutions Architect here at Apogee, and I'm joined today by Sir Anant.
This is Anant Jingran, the more handsome part of the duo.
More handsome. Oh, we're starting right away here. So today we're going to talk a bit about data and about analytics and about insights. If my memory serves, this is the first time we've actually covered this topic. So this will be a good introduction to what I'm sure will be follow-up conversations down the road.
As they say, you can't have too much of insights.
Yeah. So that's right. We can't see them or hear them. We don't know if people are responding to your humor this morning or not.
Well, Biruta will come running inside if either our jokes are falling flat or they can't see us.
Okay. So less critical today since you've got the video stream. Here are our mugs. And I want to remind everybody once again to join us for the after party on the API Craft Google group. This is a vendor-neutral site that's just becoming a real hotspot for discussions around anything API related. I know many of you who are attending this session are active participants. There have been some great discussion threads on there lately, so I really encourage everyone to take a look. We also have a YouTube channel where we put up these videos. These will be the ones where we actually look good, where they've edited the video and cleaned up our audio and make us sound really intelligent. So we always have our videos up on the Apogee YouTube channel. So we're going to talk today about visibility at the edge. We've talked a lot about security in the past. We have a couple discussions on OAuth. We've talked about API management, RESTful APIs, why maybe your API sucks. We've had lots of different angles on this, but I really don't think we've talked much about the data or visibility you get from this. So we're lucky to have Anant with us because Anant is pretty legendary in this field. You are an IBM fellow on data and analytics, correct?
But that was then.
That was then. So I shouldn't mention that you also have code shipping in the DB2 database, right?
Yeah, that was then.
Yeah, well, the important thing for me, I appreciate that. The important thing for me is that it shows that you're someone who I can really listen to when it comes to data. That is not my background. Right? I'm a former programmer, software architect, but data was not my specialty, so I'm very much looking forward to this.
Fantastic. As long as I get listened to for half my day at work, because I'm not sure the same thing happens at home.
Right.
So this is great.
You're not a fellow at home.
Absolutely.
No. And how should we address an IBM fellow? This has come up several times. Is it Sir Anant? Or?
Absolutely not, man.
Absolutely not. Fellow Anant. All right. So the topic of today's webinar is visibility at the edge. So what do we mean by that? What is it that people can expect to get out of this webinar?
So, I mean, Brian, we have talked a lot about in the past, and you have talked about it, Sam and Brian Malloy and others have talked about the fact that previously enterprises could focus on controlling the interactions that their customers had with them, either through physical presence or through their websites.
Okay.
But what's happening is increasingly this control is shifting away from the enterprise, and people are interacting with the core businesses of the enterprise, for example, through apps. So the customers have moved farther and farther away, but yet they remain as important as before, if not more. So how do you actually understand what is really driving the customers, what is really driving your business when you're no longer in control of how they're interacting with you?
Got it. So this whole app economy has kind of shifted the relationship between the one-way discussion from the website to the customer, and now we have two-way discussion with the apps. And then it would make sense that from a data and analytics side that it's getting more segmented. More of your data is coming in through apps. More of your data is coming in through APIs. That makes sense to me why we need to have this discussion. All right. So, as we dive into this, again, I have a lot to learn here also. I get it that, I'm out helping customers a lot with their API programs. I get that we're collecting lots of data off the applications and websites that are using the API, and sometimes just other machines and devices that are using the API. That we're collecting a lot of data here. I know we're going to go into what that means. Like, now I've collected the data, and now what? How much data am I collecting? What am I getting myself into now?
Yes.
And how can I take any action off of this? But I think it helps here if we set up what is the grail here? What is it that we're trying to get? So what is all this visibility going to tell us?
Absolutely. So if you can just flip to the next slide. Brian, if you kind of think about around kind of your APIs where your customers are interacting with you, and they may of course be having other interactions which are not necessarily just with their APIs. There are lots of constituents. There are, of course, the people who are transacting with you. There are the developers who build the apps. There are teams within the enterprise who are responsible for the success of that API or for the operations of those APIs.
Right.
And then finally, there are business users who are just looking at the top line or bottom line and everything else.
Right.
Now, today what happens is that you have a lot of interactions that have been happening through multiple channels. And one of the biggest problems that enterprises face is how do you actually collect the disparate or siloed perspectives that you're getting through those various channels? And then how do you kind of make a 360-degree sense out of it?
Okay.
Now, if you kind of believe in this app economy, you say, okay, no, listen, things are going to get standardized around this quote-unquote interface called API. Now, through that interface, some people may be interacting with your catalog system, some people may be interacting with your procurement system, some people might be interacting with your order management systems, you may be doing other kinds of actions and everything else. But your APIs and your management of those APIs actually gives you the visibility for a much larger set of interactions than any one system at the back end actually gets. And therefore, if you are able to harness that visibility, it doesn't matter whether you are running the operations of the backend system, whether your business is to make those APIs successful, or whether you are actually a business person interested in your business APIs. What's happening to those systems, and I've kind of highlighted some examples out here, you can get a lot of insights into your business out there. But there's one more part that I think that these APIs give that is even more transformative. And that is, instead of reflecting it towards what is the enterprise learning from the APIs, how do you actually reflect it back to how the developers and the interactors through the developers actually get visibility into what's going on? So, because all interactions are happening like this, they can be reflected towards an internal perspective, but they can also be reflected towards the developer. So if you are a developer, wouldn't you like to know what kind of impact you're having, right, on the business over which you have built up the next coolest app?
Sure.
Right? Not just how many downloads of your app have happened, but what kind of impact you are having out there. Visibility into those APIs gives insights to all the constituents.
Got it. So if I can say what I think I heard there, so I've probably got some internal analytic systems right now. I'm probably getting my operational analytics. I'm probably getting some back-end system analytics, but I don't have a 360 view, is what you're saying. If I'm not getting this kind of information off the API, if I'm not getting those hops that are beyond my data center, I really don't have an actionable view.
That's exactly right.
Okay, so I understood. So far, so good. Okay, so I think I'm with you, and hopefully everyone else is too. So I get what we're trying to do here. I understand that 360 visibility would be very useful. And what do I need to do? How can I make that happen?
So what we're going to do is switch a bit into some technological issues.
Okay.
Okay. We'll try to geekify it a bit. Okay.
Okay.
Not that much.
Okay.
And then we'll kind of step back and look at some organizational issues, because for all of us, technology, right, can be done. right?
Right.
It is sometimes the business issues that get in the way. But let's first talk about technology.
Okay.
So, I talked about the fact that there are these APIs and there's a lot of interaction that's happening through those APIs. So obviously, you want to collect the data that are flowing through the APIs.
Right.
Obviously, right? But if you are producing the APIs or you are consuming the APIs, what you will soon realize is that the API traffic is not the be all end all. Even though it's kind of a choke point through which a lot of transactions flow through, a lot of context is lost in that. So you have to actually collect more data than just your API data. And then finally, of course, you've got to be able to analyze it. Collecting is one thing, right? Collecting is like a digital landfill, right?
Right.
It's like a digital landfill. How do you actually gain insights from it? So I think the core artifacts in order to make this thing happen are collect your API data, collect context data, and run analytics on top of it.
Got it. I'm still stuck on the digital landfill.
Fantastic.
That is a great metaphor.
Okay, great, absolutely. I wish I could take credit for it, but I don't think I came up with it.
That's not you?
No, I don't think so.
All right. So you just talked about a few pieces here. The APIs themselves are a new source of data themselves, like traffic, performance, platforms, that kind of thing, are actually coming from as though they're just another new system in our ecosystem producing data. We've talked a little bit about analytics, and I assume where we're going with that is if we don't do anything with data, we're basically just collecting boxes and garbage in a big digital landfill.
We're collecting good shit, but it's not delivering value.
We can have a lot of shelfware, a lot of good stuff on the shelves. We can have lots of great new equipment sitting in boxes in the warehouse.
Absolutely.
All right. So, but I think the part that's most interesting here is context. So, you want to talk a little more about how this is giving us the full context?
So what happens is this, that let's take a look and see, right? So if I am, for example, interacting with a telco API, okay, what might be flowing through the APIs is the cell phone number, right?
Okay.
Because that's relevant for that particular transaction that needs to happen on that API.
Right, some kind of identifier.
Some kind of identifier. In this case, a cell phone number, which is more than that. But there's a huge amount of context, okay, that is not captured in that particular API, right? Whose mobile number is it? And what do you know about that person with respect to it? Or which app is that particular transaction taking place through? Who was the developer? You may have a developer key that flows through on that API because somebody has to be authenticated. But what else do you know about the developer, right?
Right.
The developer may be single sourcing on you, may be working with others, may be saying nice things about you, may not be saying nice things about you.
Right.
May have some particular brand following with respect to people who actually get that stuff. So the point in this is that it's very clear that visibility into APIs is going to be perhaps the best aperture into the enterprise, because it is the way that people are going to interact with you.
Right.
But just API data is not going to be sufficient. And you need a mechanism to collect other contextual data, because knowing a mobile number versus knowing the name, address, and payment history of the person who's using it are two very, very different things. So how do you actually collect enough context around the API data so that your analytics is no longer just looking at the bits and bytes of APIs, but is actually understanding the context and is able to deduce from that context?
Okay, I think I got it. So if it's without that context, I'm still getting valuable operational information.
Yes.
SLAs, traffic performance, that kind of thing. I'm even getting some identifiers and some key payload or header information off the requests themselves.
You're actually getting even more. For example, you may get your business impacts coming from the APIs. So for example, you might learn that so many products are being purchased, right?
Right.
You might learn that so much of revenue is being affected through those APIs. Absolutely right. Absolutely right. But you do not know in which context that particular product was purchased. You do not know in which context that app was built. You do not know whether that developer, right, is about to leave and build his or her app against something else. So API data is great for operational visibility and business visibility. But API data with context is just absolutely fantastic for business visibility. Is that making sense?
It does make sense. It takes it from the operational layer and maybe even from the architectural layer up to impacting business.
Absolutely right.
Got it.
Absolutely.
Got it. And that's a pretty snazzy diagram, I gotta say.
I agree. Again, I wish I could take credit for it, but Brian, you are more artistic than I am. And therefore it was created by somebody who was closer to your brain power rather than mine.
Yeah, I'm more of a word guy.
You're a word guy? Okay, absolutely right.
Okay, so this continues what we've been talking about, which I think is a really good thread, which is, okay, we've got operational data, we've got architectural level data that could impact architecture decisions or development decisions, but if we want to impact, business, this is our API data plus the context, and, the obvious question here is, so it sounds like I'm putting together multiple digital landfills. Am I starting to have a gigantic big data solution necessary for my company?
So, no. We are going towards a big data story. But I mean, obviously, big data is one of those things where everybody has attached themselves to big data. And big data will cure all the world's disease, and peace will
Excellent.
Well,
that's good to hear.
Peace will happen. Absolutely.
Finally, after thousands and thousands of years, we finally nailed it. Big data.
Yeah, no, of course. If you've got, I'm reading Pinker's book on how the world is actually more peaceful now than it ever was. Maybe with big data, it will be even more peaceful. We'll see.
All right.
We'll see. But sorry. So yes, indeed, I'll give you some examples, right? So let's say we know this for a fact, Brian, that APIs, there's a conflict in APIs whether are they designed for back-end efficiency or are they designed for easy consumption, right? And you have been on the road telling people that we deal with, enterprises that we deal with, that always focus on the consumption side.
Right.
Because you can always optimize later on.
Yep.
But if you optimize for your back end and nobody comes, what's the advantage? Right?
Right.
Right? So the net of it is that the API traffic tends to be very chatty and voluminous.
Yep.
Right? If you're doing, even a simple enterprise, if it's doing 1,000 transactions per second, you can easily end up with 200 terabytes of data that's being generated every year. Now, 200 terabytes is not small, it's not huge compared to the Twitters and the Facebooks and the Googles, but not everybody the Twitters and the Facebooks and the Googles. So it is indeed the case. It is indeed the case that just by the volume of the traffic and the chattiness of the traffic, that you are going towards larger data solutions. And it is also very clear, Brian, and I've talked a lot about it in the past that you're making fun of me, that it's not just so much about just data volume, but how you interact with the data. Because what happens is this, that traditional data warehouses, what you're talking to me about having contributed to DB2, have been built to answer questions that you know in a repeated fashion.
Okay.
The new big data solutions are there to determine the questions to ask, right? So it's not just the volume that is of issue, but what I talk about with respect to is the kind of the variety of questions that you really want to ask. And since in this API world and customer-centric world, you actually don't really know what patterns you're looking for and everything else, right?
Right.
So because of both of them, indeed, I would assert, even though I'm not a big fan of buzzwordness, indeed, I would assert that we are looking at a big data solution.
Not a big fan of buzzwordness. We already have on this webinar digital landfill and big data creating
Okay.
world peace.
Okay,
That is a way of understating it.
let me tell you, I had not planned on talking about digital landfill or world peace, but it just came out because I'm a spontaneous person, and you make make these things come out.
I'm glad it did, because
Okay.
that's what I'm going to walk away here with. No, it makes sense. So to me, that was actually kind of mind-blowing. So it is a bit of an inversion. Like you're saying, traditional data warehouses are about asking the same question repeatedly, or the same set of questions
Yes,
repeatedly.
yes.
This is a total inversion, if I'm understanding right, because what I'm talking to lots of people out there, lots of companies out there, is it is their first API program. They don't really know what to expect.
Exactly.
They don't know, is it going to be mostly known partners or unknown third-party developers? They don't know what success is going to look like. That is actually very interesting. So, and this is where we've kind of been dancing around all morning here, is it's one thing to collect a bunch of data, and I think that's relatively easy to do, and I think we're all guilty of it. We all have gigantic logs lying around that nobody's ever looked at. It's another thing to actually get something useful from that data, and the term you're using for it is insights. So I'm as guilty as anybody. I've had systems storing stuff, systems capturing information. I'll probably need it later, so let's capture this data on these customers, on whatever. Let's store it in our secure databases. Let's generate logs that get shipped to other logs that get aggregated and transformed, and nobody's actually looking at any of this stuff. So it's not very actionable, and it's not very useful, and it actually is taking up bandwidth and storage and MIPS or processor time, depending on what you're running on. So this clearly is not the right way to do it. Or you're saying I shouldn't just be collecting tons and tons of data and never doing anything with it, I'm guessing.
No, absolutely right. So let's look at some metrics here. So I talked about this. If you're generating kind of 1,000 transactions per second, you may be generating like 200 terabytes per year.
Okay.
Now, intuitively, all of us believe that storage cost is going down, and it's just fantastic. Infinite storage is available in the cloud, and all goodness will accrue from it. Which is true if you're storing a byte, it's indeed true. But if you're storing 200 terabytes, and then you're storing it in kind of a landfill fashion, and therefore your 200 terabytes don't get stored for 1 month, or 6 months, or 1 year, or 5 years, right? You are staring at even at kind of Amazon costs, and obviously I'm kind of being very simplistic here. Without any kind of three-way replications, without any backups and all that, you're looking at hundreds of thousands of dollars per month just for storage. So clearly that can't be right. It cannot be, in spite of everybody saying storage costs are going up. You have to get incremental value for incremental investments.
Okay.
And the only way you're going to get incremental value is not to say store and forget. It is store, analyze, synthesize, get insights. Okay?
Okay.
And then determine what else to store.
Okay.
Right? So we need a very tight loop between data, analysis, and business decisions.
Okay.
Without that kind of tight loop, somebody within the enterprise will scream and say, for all the investment that we're doing for the cost, what's the value we're getting?
And I think that's a fair question.
Yes.
Yeah. We're capturing a bunch of data, we're paying to store it. What are we getting?
Because you can always see the cost, right?
Right.
And if the value is zero, then the cost will obviously get seriously looked at. Right?
Right. Okay. And that makes sense.
So don't ever store and forget. Store, analyze, act, and then expand. Incremental value for incremental investment.
Got it. Which is just generally a good practice. Don't try
Which
to
is
boil the
generally-
ocean. Don't do everything at once.
Yes. In general, it's a good practice. Sometimes the shot to the moon doesn't happen with incremental value for incremental investment, but in general, that's a good philosophy.
Yeah, I don't know. I think they actually launched a few people into orbit first.
Yeah, no, that's
Actually,
true.
there were
That is also
several.
true. I agree. So I've fallen flat with my example here. Absolutely, man.
Sorry. All right. So, all right. To someone like me, again, who's not a data specialist, I'm getting it. I'm capturing data. I understand that I've got different types of data. I understand that I need to mix something in with that data, which sounds like a human being or human beings to look at this data in order to get anything useful out of it. That sounds like, if I haven't done this before, this sounds difficult. This sounds like something a little different than maybe the traditional data warehouses, things that I've done in the past that have made me successful and comfortable.
No, but the history of warehouse is that more warehousing projects fail than succeed. So that is also difficult, right? That's also difficult. But I think that there are certain other technological things that are happening that are easier, will make this on-ramp easier, right? So I talked about incremental cost for incremental value. So clearly you want to look at what is your first cost for first value.
Okay.
Right? Now, interestingly, even though I was kind of talking about cloud and storage and everything else, it is a fact that getting infrastructure in is not easy in a small enterprise or a large enterprise. And therefore, any enterprise looking at an API strategy should look at a cloud-based model.
Okay.
Either by people who know how to do it or by your own folks, but look at a place where you are not showing upfront cost without showing the value.
Okay.
And cloud is the best model for get more, deliver more, and get further more, right? Whereas enterprise IT infrastructures are typically 6 months to 12-month procurement cycles, right?
Okay.
Where you've got to plan, and how can you plan in this particular space?
Got
You
it.
don't know what your API traffic will be. You don't know what value you will get from the data that you'll want to analyze in that particular API traffic, right? So cloud-based infrastructure is, I think, extremely important. Second is, if you just look at your API data, even though we talked about context, right? Even we talked about, there's a lot that you can learn from it, right? And there's a lot that you can learn from it fairly fast. You can learn what's working, what's not working. You can learn certain business metrics. You can learn kind of the volumes and peaks, etc., etc. So there's think about out of the box. What are the canned things out of the box that you want to expose to your business users, right?
Okay.
And that would be instantaneous value. It may not be business value, it may be operational value, but it's still instantaneous value. And then instead of boiling the ocean with respect to context data is like infinitely large, right?
Okay.
The fact that a butterfly flittered in Nepal, right, may actually impact something that has happened here. But how much of context data do you want to collect? So don't boil the ocean with respect to context data. Expand slightly around your API data. Say, okay, listen, we want customer visibility. So instead of mobile numbers, let's see what are the data we can get in order to be able to get that kind of visibility.
So restricting your scope, unless of course you are a Nepalese firm who's interested in butterflies, in which case that would be very valuable data.
Absolutely.
Right, but trying to reduce the scope of what you're taking in, because I see what you're saying. You could go crazy with context here.
You can go crazy.
Every piece of data out there, every social and network connection could be some kind of context.
Absolutely.
But you need to think about what's actually your core context. How do you break that down? How do I say, do I just look at my core business and say these are aspects of my core business that would be relevant?
That's it. Either determine that you're currently going to focus on operational aspects or some business aspect, and then add a little bit of context and see whether it adds value, and then add more, as opposed to, again, paying for the cost of context without knowing what value it returns.
Got it. So an example that jumps to my mind, maybe it's not that relevant, is for some maybe retail businesses or tourism businesses, I could add the weather or something
Absolutely.
like that. That's an example of a contextual piece of data.
100%. Absolutely. So again, so just to reiterate, look at cloud. That will help you get incremental cost for incremental value. Have some out-of-the-box API level information, and then have a limited aperture for context as opposed to eyes wide open.
Okay, and then just to make sure I understood your first point on all this was, coming from some Fortune 500 companies myself, I know that the ramp up time for procurement, for the racking and stacking, for the getting everything ready to go, you're saying that that's a big upfront investment. So the time to useful, actionable information is very long, and the investment upfront is very high. If you're going into an existing cloud infrastructure, that means I can turn that around much faster. My time from start of project, lower initial cost, and my time to getting something useful back from it is much, much shorter.
Exactly right.
Okay. All right, so we've talked about collecting data. We even talked about running some analytics on the data. But I think the holy grail here is actually impacting the business, right? Doing something that's not just says, okay, we're seeing a slight increase in iOS development, or we're seeing a slight increase on traffic on Wednesdays, right? That's some basic analytics. We want to do something insightful.
Yes, yes. See, in the end, right? In the end, we really enjoy, I mean, I'm using the collective sense of geeks assembled around this table at least, of running algorithms on large data, at least I do, right? And we'll make you also, Brian, love that stuff,
Okay.
right? But how is that relevant to the business? So I am a firm believer that we have to go from what we call analytics to insights.
Okay.
Okay. So the key ingredient here is, in my mind, quite simply, analytics is about running machines and machine learning and computation on large amounts of data.
Okay.
Analytics is about what machines can tell us.
Okay.
Insights is about how people can take the output of the machines and convert it into a business action. And therefore the end goal is not to just build an infrastructure that spits out these beautiful analytics. The end goal, as you pointed out, is to derive insights from it, right?
Okay.
And make a business impact. So I'll give you an example. So the analytics where we could run kind of historical analysis or prediction algorithms and everything else, we could say the analytics could tell us that our app usage is peaking at 6 p.m.
Okay.
The insights would be not just looking at that, but insights will come from two people. I'm just making it up.
Okay.
One is the IT person who would say, okay, if that's the case, if that's what machines are telling us, the insight, the aha is that for those sets of APIs that deal with e-commerce, because that's where purchase it, we better run those APIs on the cloud.
Okay.
Because they are the ones where we're getting kind of a peak traffic, and then most of the time we're getting less traffic.
Okay.
So we don't want to invest in the infrastructure.
Okay.
Right? The second insight would come from somebody who'd say, aha, I actually understand why this is happening. This is happening because people are connected at work and they use their mobile devices, right? Once they get home. And therefore, if that is what's happening, how do I make my apps or my APIs stickier for the mobile devices, right? So what we are going from is machines telling us something to machines plus people saying, what does it mean for the business? Going from analytics to insights.
Got it. So the analytics can be viewed also more at an operational level. They'll tell us some basic things. The machines are smart enough. I know the smartest computer in the world can only count to one, but they're smart enough.
42. I thought 42 was the answer.
Well, I'm not sure that's a real computer. But I understand. So the machines are giving us some basic level stuff, but they can't think in a way needed. Right now we need a human, and later on our robotic overlords, I assume,
Yes.
to be able to take that output from the machines, do some intelligence on it, and then produce something that's actionable by the business.
Yes. So all I'm trying to say is that all of the big data and everybody else seems to be of the point of view that machines can actually replace human beings. And I have actually, I always believe in this instead of artificial intelligence, There's a theory by some people in cybernetics and all that called intelligence augmentation, amplification actually, IA as opposed to AI.
Right.
Where all of this is in service of the people and the real insights are coming from the people, not from the machines. Okay, so
Got it.
keep that in mind, that you cannot take people out of the loop, and machines and data, all the context data and all the machines, you still have to couple them with people who will actually deliver the insights.
Got it. And I think that's actually kind of the profound moment of this discussion, because I was probably guilty, like everyone else, of thinking that the analytics spitting out of those machines was sufficient, that we didn't need people in that equation.
Okay.
And, so joking aside, that's a very profound point.
So we started with a dump in the beginning,
Yes.
digital dump.
Yes.
Now we have gone to something profound, so that's good.
That's
is
excellent.
excellent.
Quite a long way to cover.
That's
in just a few
absolute,
minutes.
absolute.
We did in one of the previous webinars. We did go into Battlestar Galactica a little bit, where the robots, the machines were in fact kind of kicking our butts.
Yeah,
so I don't know if we want
absolutely.
if there are any Cylons listening, we don't want to anger them today. But I get it that we definitely need people involved here.
Yeah.
No, that's really important. I really think if I'm going to walk away with one thing today, it's going to be that I need to add people into that equation, and then I will get the insights. But if I don't add people in, I'm not going to get those insights. So you mentioned at the beginning, and those of us in technology, we all start out thinking everything is bits and bytes, ones and zeros, that everything is going to behave in a predictable fashion, like a closed system, like machines. But we know the real challenges tend not to be technology challenges. Right? We can generally solve those. We can figure out a way to connect
Yes.
a marshmallow and
Yes.
a refrigerator. We can do whatever.
Yes, whatever that would produce.
Whatever that would produce, I'm
Whatever
sure there's some valuable data that
Yes.
would be coming off of that. The point is that it's generally organizational, right? It's generally
Yes.
people,
Yes.
politics, bureaucracy. That's where we usually stumble. And so I imagine that there's no different here for big data, or is big data not only creating world peace, but getting through corporate bureaucracy?
Oh, no, so that's a good way of putting it. So I'll make a meta point and then I'll come to the big data point. So one thing is that I think it's very important for people who are embarking on the API journey to get the buy-in that they have to invest not only in the APIs but the insights from the APIs also. It is not let's first do this and then do that, because the way you will monetize your this, which is your APIs, is through that, which is insights from the APIs.
Okay.
So partially what it's a tougher story. Unfortunately, I'm telling an even tougher story, that as for those of you who are in organizations and are trying to set up your APIs and your business of APIs, that you have to make for a culture within your larger organizations where it's not just APIs but insights on APIs that have to be invested in, because one is not going to succeed without the other.
Got it.
Okay, that's number one. The second point is kind of a more meta point. Indeed, not all enterprises are sold on APIs.
Okay.
Right? They see interesting things happening. Somebody has heard the word API. They say, "Man, what is this API? Let's go do APIs." Or people have walked in, as we know, the CEOs have walked in with the cutest app on their iPhones and said, "Why can't we do this with respect to our own things?" Right?
Right.
So we know this, that APIs are not necessarily today a fully sanctioned arm of the enterprises. It's still a budding, it still needs to be nurtured, right? Because I'm sure for every 3 people who are excited about APIs within an organization, there are 3 other people who are saying it's a flash in the pan, or by golly, what do you mean we are going to let people in to interact with our backend systems?
Right.
What the hell is wrong with you, right?
Right.
Right. So there is an issue with respect to kind of what I would say executive sponsorship that is very important for these 2 parts that I talked about, the APIs and the insights from those APIs. Because without that executive sponsorship, of course it has to deliver value, but without that executive sponsorship, the naysayers or the skeptics within the organization may kill it before it is
Got it.
even fully born, right?
Okay.
So I just like to so that's why it's important to kind of understand the organizational issues, right? And make sure that we are not just approaching it from technology perspective and kind of cover our bases, because in the end APIs, we know this, are absolutely transformational, but there will be bumps in the road, and if you don't have that organizational air cover, those bumps in the roads could actually get
And so
scary.
is it just an example of, setting expectations correctly, or is it that there are a lot of people with wrong assumptions? Like, we talked about earlier how even people like me thought it was mostly what was coming out of the machines, the analytics coming out of the machines. Is it you just, when you're setting up your API program, you should also set those expectations around insights and get the decision makers on board with that?
And the way you do it is you typically don't talk about random promises. What you want to do is, again, as I said, incremental value for incremental effort. Make sure that you don't consume 100% of your effort for the first 6 months in delivering your APIs.
Got it.
Spend 80% of your effort and spend 20% of your effort on what it's showing you. Go show that to the top bosses, or go show that to yourself. You don't have to even do it for impressing the top bosses. You can do that to improve yourself. But make them peers as opposed to a waterfall model.
Got it. That makes perfect sense. If we just take a random hypothetical example, like say we were NASA trying to get to the moon, we would instead of saying, well, we'll come back to you when we've landed, we'll basically say, no, we're going to show you our first rocket prototype.
That's it.
We're going to show you our first.
That's it. And in fact, we are improving because we are showing what's going on.
Got it.
Okay?
That makes sense.
That's about it.
So that was actually a very, very interesting conversation.
Very kind of you to say that.
Yes, yeah, and I don't mean to have such surprise in my voice when I say it. I'm just not really a data specialist myself, and so this was actually very very good for me. I really think I have a much better handle on this now. I'd like to open it up if there are any questions from the participants out there, from the audience.
What we want to ensure is that we don't make that same, so the transactional automation within the enterprises happened about 10 years before enterprises started to think about business optimization. Okay? So they all implemented on their SAP systems or Oracle systems and all that, and then said, okay, now what do we learn from it? I strongly believe that we've got to reduce the gap, right? We shouldn't first build the best APIs and then try to understand what it's telling us. Because the example that I've told this to you, there's a saying in Africa which says that it doesn't matter whether you're a gazelle or a lion. And we'll forget about who eats whom and everything else.
I think it's pretty clear.
Yeah, that's very clear. No. The moral of the story is that some of the gazelles actually escape, and some of the lions go hungry, right?
But surely the gazelles don't eat the lion.
No, yeah, that's also true. That's also true. But it doesn't matter. When the sun comes up, you better start running. And what I want to do is just I want to be the voice of elevating the need for, in this new world, to not think about analytics as an afterthought, but start thinking about it when the sun comes up.
Got it. And we have really been all over the globe during this hour, right? We came from Nepal, and now we're down to the gazelles and lions, and NASA, and that's excellent. So we have had a few questions come in. Let's start with this one here that says, are there any concrete examples that you would add to an API to make it useful for insight? So are there more insight-ready or insight-friendly APIs than others? Is there something I need to do in the design of my API that would make it more insight-friendly?
I would assert that you never think about insights as your end goal. You think about insights as the thing that will actually help you improve your API. So there are really two things, right? You're either in the business of APIs, or you are running a business.
Okay.
Only two constituents, and the developers on the other side. If you are in the business of APIs, you never want to optimize for insights. You want the insights to help you optimize your business.
Got it.
Right? You still want your APIs to be optimized for the developers and everything else. And you want your insights to help you optimize that. You don't want to build the APIs so that your insights are easier. Is that making sense?
It does make sense.
Is that right?
Yeah.
If you are in the business, that is, your APIs are now generating a large amount of traffic, right? If your APIs are generating a large amount of traffic, then your insights into the business of APIs is really insights into the business. Correct?
Got it.
Again, you don't want the tail wagging the horse. Is that the expression? Or no, tail wagging the dog.
Yeah.
Or cart before the horse. I forget. Man,
just throw them all in.
Throw them all in. Throw them all into the digital landfill. But again, the point always is that insight should not be the lead dog. Now, with respect to data, though, it's true. You want to make sure that you are collecting the right data that will help you with the insights. So, with respect to the contextual data, I would assert that it is indeed true that you want to make certain things, you want to collect certain things that actually give you better insights. Now, that particular part of it, we have got certain things out of the box that I can think of. Your APIs are all focused towards attracting developers.
Mm-hmm.
And in the end, your APIs are all focused towards the users of those apps that are built by the developers. So the two starting contextual data that could be very interesting is how much can you learn about the developers, right? Not just the email with which they have registered, what else do they know about it?
Right.
Or how much can you learn about the end users? Okay, those are the kind of two contexts that actually help improve the insights that then help improve your APIs or help improve your business. But never focus on insights as the end goal. Is that making sense?
It does make sense, and it actually kind of ties into the another question that's come in, which is about like balancing the value of external info. And I would interpret this in two ways. One is that, how do I, we talked a little earlier, how do I know how to scope it down and just get a few pieces of external info weighed against the fact that I'm going to have to store it, and not only collect it, but store it and analyze it. And also there are some existing systems out there. So the example mentioned was around contact info. We know there are a lot of existing systems in the cloud already that do this kind of thing, that have this kind of data. Should I be collecting it also if there are already systems out there? How do I know when to just gather from another system and when I should be collecting something?
Yes, that's perhaps is a subject of a whole different discussion. In general, if you think you're going to derive a huge amount of value out of it, then you want to be able to slice and dice that data in different ways. And the only way you can actually slice and dice that data in different ways is if you have a copy.
Okay.
Because otherwise, you are going to access the data through the APIs of the other person who is sitting on top of that data, which is also absolutely fine. Which is absolutely fine, because after all, we are an API company, right? We are an API company, right? So the recommendation that I have is, don't try to grab the data right now.
Okay.
Work with people who have put up APIs in front of the data. See what value you get out of it. If you're getting value which requires you to do more than just accessing it through those APIs, figure out a way if you can strike a business deal with some of those people.
Okay.
And actually get copies of the data.
Okay. And there was just one last question on asking specifically to us, what kind of things we're tracking for customers, and asking, do we provide insights to our customer base?
Yeah. So let's be very clear. Apigee is only in the business of helping the enterprises attract developers and attract users. So we are not collecting any information. All we are doing is we are providing tools so that our customers can actually attract their customers, which are developers, and their customers, which are end users.
Okay.
So what we do is, we out of the box, we provide mechanisms by which APIs can be sliced and diced from the context of the developers and the end users associated with the developers. And we provide hooks into that system that allows people to bring in external data or call out to the external data.
Got it.
Okay? Over time, we may pre-package certain hooks based on some of the context that I've talked about today. But today, that's what we do.
Okay, I think it's a good clarification. And with that, I think we're just about out of time. So I really appreciate everyone joining us once again. These webinars are always a lot of fun. You guys are great. We always get lots of great feedback, great questions, helping us to improve the quality of these webinars. Again, join us on the Google group. It's a great place to ask questions anytime and frankly to answer questions from other folks. Jump in and be part of it. Suranand, thank you very much for joining us.
Oh, shut up, man. When we are off this, I'm going to sock you, man. Okay, hey guys. Hey, thank you so much, Brian,
right.
for arranging this.
All right, thanks everyone. Have a great day.